You're listening to Autumn on the Air, the weekly podcast that brings you conversations about the impact of research commercialization and the people who make it happen. Join us for interviews with patent and licensing professionals, innovators, entrepreneurs, and tech transfer leaders on the issues and trends that matter most. Keep listening for an inside track on the people, IP policies, and politics changing our world.
Welcome to Autumn on the Air. Today we're exploring the development of intellectual property and technology transfer in Jamaica. Joining us for this discussion is Loreen Walker, who played a pivotal role in setting up the Jamaican Intellectual Property Office, also known as JIPO, back in 2002, and she's here to share her experiences and insights with us. Loreen Walker has been an attorney at law for more than 40 years. She's worked in the private and public sectors and academia. Her experience spans commercial, corporate, labor, pension, insurance, intellectual property, and sports law. In 2002, Loreen became the first head of the Jamaican Intellectual Property Office and worked very closely with WIPO to put JIPO on firm footing. After leaving JIPO in 2005, Loreen worked with the Jamaican Coffee Industry Board, Regulatory Division, home of the world-famous Jamaica Blue Mountain coffee. She later moved on to the University of West Indies, where she advised the university on intellectual property and tech transfer matters. She is now retired from the university and is involved in developing tech transfer services for the Jamaican public. Welcome, Loreen. I'm so excited to have you here on the air.
I'm so happy to be here, Lisa. I see this as another opportunity to advance tech transfer and IP in Jamaica and the Caribbean. So I'm really excited to be on this podcast.
Well, we're very excited to have you here. And let me start things off by asking you, how did you even get your start in tech transfer? And tell us how this path led you to becoming the first head of the Jamaican Intellectual Property Organization back in 2002, because that's a really interesting journey. So tell us what led you to take that role and what was that experience like for you?
Well, it was head of the Jamaica Intellectual Property Office before tech transfer. So that is how I got into tech transfer. I was exposed to tech transfer while I was at the Jamaica Intellectual Property Office. Jamaica and the Caribbean, we are very creative people, and I guess maybe because of the different influences that we have had, from Africa, from Europe, and from other countries, India, China. We're very innovative and very creative people. And so I've always been interested in how we can make that creativity and innovation work for us. So when I went to the Jamaica Intellectual Property Office, I then understood, through the whole tech transfer process, how we could benefit from that innovation and creativity that we naturally have. And that's how I really got into tech transfer, because I saw it really as a way of improving the Jamaican economy and the Caribbean, So, yeah, that was my inspiration.
Yeah, that's a pretty amazing journey. And, talk to us a little bit about how the Jamaican IPO came into being and what was it like as a relatively new office working with other organizations and offices like WIPO in some of the early days?
Well, the Jamaica Intellectual Property Office really came out of, that whole TRIPS agreement situation, where, we signed on to TRIPS which required that we put in place intellectual property laws. Now, before JIPO, we actually had bits and pieces of intellectual property protection in various government offices. So, for example, we had a copyright unit in a government department, and we had trademarks, which the trademarks office was part of the company's office. So those two functions were connected. The registration of companies and the registration of trademarks, they were done in the same office. And we also had a registration system for patents. So when we signed on to TRIPS and we had the obligation to protect all forms of intellectual property, the government decided to bring all of these little bits and pieces together into one office. And so they passed a law establishing the Jamaica Intellectual Property Office. So that's how we started.
That's really an amazing story. And I want you to go back and reflect on your early days at JIPO and what were some of the challenges you faced in getting things up and running? And how do you think JIPO has changed over the years, considering shifts in the IP landscape?
Wow, those early days were, the big problem in those early days was the knowledge gap. That was a huge problem.
I bet that was huge, yeah.
Yeah. And so working with the, organizations like WIPO helped us to partially fill that knowledge gap. Because at the same time, we had to be promulgating new legislation, new IP legislation, because we didn't really have any IP legislation. What we had was some old English legislation that we got when we were colonies of Britain, and Jamaica has only been a sovereign country since 1962. So we had these old laws that we got as a colony of Britain. We had a old Copyright Act, and we had an ancient Patents Act, and we didn't have a Trademarks Act. So we basically were starting from the ground.
There's a lot of heavy lifting.
Yeah, so it was really really challenging getting the legislation in place, and WIPO helped a lot with that. And we had lots of meetings in the region, because the thought at the time, it did not work out that way, but the thought at the time was that we should have have the same types of laws in the Caribbean, which would make it easier to administer IP in the Caribbean. It didn't work out that way, but that was the thought. And so we had a lot of meetings to try and get that done.
And it must have been hard too once you were started to hire people, like you said, the knowledge gap and creating materials and training materials for training examiners and people who are going to be reviewing all this IP. I mean, must have been a tremendously busy time given all these heavy lifts that you had to do. So I'm curious, what strategies did you find most effective in developing and establishing this first IP office in Jamaica?
Well, we made sure that we utilized the courses that WIPO offered. They had some online courses. They would come down to Jamaica or the region and have seminars. And so we made sure that we utilized all of that. And we made sure that people were exposed to, what we saw as the future of IP in Jamaica at the time, and to, get people enthusiastic about IP protection. One of the early things that was done was to establish a number of collective management organizations, because, Jamaica and music. So we wanted to show, the artists that the system can work for them. And so a number of collective management organizations were established in the region. In Jamaica, the first one was a music CMO, but we also have a literary CMO. So that was what we tried to do, to expose, the stakeholders to the benefits that that can be received from IP protection. That's an ongoing exercise, because yes, we are, the music, we are familiar with the music, but there are other things that lots of other areas of IP that that exist. So we have been able to, for example, register Jamaica jerk as a geographical indication, which is another right. So we're trying to educate stakeholders to understand the kinds of benefits that that can accrue from IP. The Jamaica Intellectual Property Office at the moment, as you rightly say, there has been so much change in IP, and I think that they are struggling to keep up with the changes.
Oh, sure, we all are struggling to keep up with all the changes.
Right. Yeah, because there are such fundamental changes. The whole AI revolution. So, and other things before that, the whole digital revolution. And now I guess we can say the AI is making it, even more complicated. So, it's a huge challenge to try and keep up, especially since, we are not, really active in some of the areas. And so perhaps what the office needs to do now is to focus on those areas that will bring the most benefit to Jamaicans, and at the same time, keeping an eye on the new areas that are developing, because they're going to affect us as well.
Absolutely. And you mentioned AI, and that's affecting everyone everywhere. So, and it's moving at such an incredible pace. So it's,
right.
Yeah, it's going to be fascinating to see what the next, 6 months, year, 3 years, 5 years brings on that front. And so you spent time getting JIPO up and running, and then you transitioned out and went into tech transfer. So I wanted to ask you about that, and how your transition from heading JIPO to advising the University of the West Indies on IP and technology affected your perspective. Did it, or maybe it didn't?
Well, it has affected my perspective, in that I realized that tech transfer is not just something that universities need to know about. And that, for a small country like ours, we need to reach out to the public at large, because people are doing things, but they don't understand that there can be a benefit. So, and that is part of the reason that I'm going into this tech transfer initiative, because I really believe that we need to engage everybody in tech transfer. If if we're going to really make the most of it and not just leave it to the universities. They might be developing new and big things, but they are not the only ones who are innovating. So I'm hoping to educate the public and also to serve universities that do not have tech transfer services in their institutions, to get them to market.
Yeah, and that's a really great segue, because I want to ask you about this really exciting initiative that you're involved in, which, as you just alluded to, is developing tech transfer services for the Jamaican public. Tell us what inspired you to undertake that project and what impact you hope it will have on innovation and entrepreneurship in Jamaica.
Well, while I was at the university, I realized that the tech transfer function was not being used by a lot of university persons for whatever reason. They weren't using the existing structure. And so I recognize that there is an underserved community in some of the universities, and that they prefer to have another option. And so a friend of mine from the university, who herself is an inventor. We talked, and she suggested that perhaps this is something that we can do, and we can leverage some of the PhDs at the university to offer the services, so that we'd be offering a different option, and leveraging the PhDs at the university, we could look at a range of inventions and products, which could be of benefit. So my services, the thought is that it will be underpinned by the experts from universities who would be interested in being involved in that. And also there are some government agencies that offer some services to the public that we intend to reach out to as well, so that we can offer a good service to people who need it. And the fact is that there is a huge connection between innovation and entrepreneurship. And I don't think that we make that connection enough. Because if you're an entrepreneur, hopefully you're offering something different from your competitors. So, I think we need to drive home that connection to people, in order to make entrepreneurship, something that people, that the public will think about as an option for their lives. So, yeah, so I want to make that connection, innovation and entrepreneurship, because a lot of people are innovating, and people tend to think, oh, if it's not a big invention, it's not worth anything. But, for small countries like ours, we need to be able to capture, innovations, even social innovations, and even like in the tourist industry. I mean, I think, we were the first ones to come up with the all-inclusive concept. I mean, these are things that we need to be able to get our hands around and to make them work for us.
So I want to keep on that theme for a second and ask you how you see IP rights and technology transfer contributing to the economic growth and innovation in the Caribbean, particularly in sectors like biotech and renewable energy?
Well, I know UWI does quite a bit of work in biotech. I know that and the two areas of biotech that they do quite a bit of work in is on the medicine side and also on the agriculture side. A friend of mine who also works at the university, I mean, she developed a cell line with respect to cancer patients. And when I was there, we were able to deposit it in an institution who would be able to then grant licenses to people who might be interested. So there is in biotech because there's a lot of interest in Caribbean people, African American people in terms of medicine and how their conditions differ from Caucasian. So there's a lot we can offer in that area. Tech transfer doesn't come easily to us because we're a small country. We have to kind of look out in order to try and maximize the benefits. We do a lot of collaborations with US and UK universities. And, so we have to understand the whole tech transfer process and to be able to give our input, because we do have unique things that we can offer in the biotech area and also in the agriculture area. I mean, there's been a lot of research in things like yams in Jamaica.
Sure. Yep.
So we are doing things in biotech. And, we need to get those things out to society to benefit society. In climate change, we're also doing a lot of work in climate change. We're doing a lot of studies. And, the whole ocean, the effect on the ocean is a huge problem for us. The coral reefs and all of that. In addition to the significantly, higher temperatures we're now feeling, we can see how, we can see climate change, really just happening in terms of what's happening to our environment. So we're doing a lot of work, and we are part. The University of West Indies has a climate change center, and it works closely with, the UN system and all of that. So, we all have to, climate change is something that all of us need to work on and contribute to, because it's a global problem and the issues are not the same everywhere. So each of us needs to analyze our situation in order to contribute to a global understanding of what is happening. I haven't really thought about IP protection for climate change solutions since it's such a global problem. But the fact is that as human beings, we are motivated by ownership and reward. So it's something that we always have to bear in mind.
For sure. So what are some of the unique opportunities and challenges that the Caribbean nations, including Jamaica, face in commercializing IP and fostering an innovation-driven entrepreneurship?
I think the big challenge for us is being able to tap into, the global commercialization opportunities as a small country. We're small players, and so what we have to make sure that we do is to consciously become a part of the global commercialization ecosystem, so that we are seen as being a player in this area. And this is one of the reasons, that I find Autumn so valuable, because you get to meet so people from so many different countries. And Autumn itself as an organization is such a huge resource. You know, so Autumn organizations like Autumn are really crucial to our commercialization initiatives. So we have to be in the game and be seen as, a country with products that can benefit society. And, I see myself as being part of us being seen in that way. That is how I see myself. So in order for that to happen, I need to have some kind of grounding. And I see the tech transfer services initiative as providing me with that sort of grounding so that I can reach out to other organizations and to be seen as a player in the area. Because if you're not seen, then um, then nothing happens. And the other thing is you have to understand, you have like any other area, you have to understand how it works. And you never understand anything unless you do it.
Exactly.
And so that's how I see myself helping, being able to understand the system, how commercialization works, so that I can bring that back to my country.
So, given that, what are some of your hopes and aspirations for the future of tech transfer and IP rights in the Caribbean?
I've always seen IP as a very important area for Jamaica and the Caribbean, as I said, because, we're, we tend to be creative and innovative people. So I've always seen that IP can benefit us. Now, what is happening is that with all these new advances, that you have to keep up with the new knowledge if you're going to compete in this new world. Because what is happening now is that we are creating a new world in which innovation, entrepreneurship, and IP are becoming even more important. I'm looking at this and I'm saying to myself that we have to try and keep up with what is happening and to understand it, and to be able to communicate in this new world. So I'm seeing Jamaica as being able to, while we may not be doing the inventions, we need to be able to understand them and to be able to communicate in this new world in order to grow. It's critical, and IP is the area of law that protects these new inventions and innovations and developments and creations, and this is all IP. We have to invest the resources to be able to keep up with what is happening in the IP world.
Absolutely. And we've talked a couple times already about the evolving landscape of IP. So I wanted to ask you, what lessons have you learned about adapting to changes and challenges in this field? And how can others apply these insights into their own careers?
It just means, in the past we have spoken generally a bit about being a lifelong learner. Well, this is, this is what this requires. We have to accept that we have to be lifelong learners. We have to change the mindset and the attitude. That you get a career, you practice your career, and then you retire, and life is wonderful. We all now have to realize that careers change and knowledge is growing at with each new piece of technology and each area of new knowledge, everything knowledge is growing exponentially, and it's so easy to get left behind if you allow yourself to. So I think the big challenge for all of us is keeping up with what is happening in the area of innovation, entrepreneurship, and IP. Otherwise, we're going to be left behind. That is the huge challenge, because the changes are so fast and so great. The other challenge that I'm seeing is that, the IP system is based on a territorial view of the world. So each country has its own laws about IP and all of that. I think that needs to be seriously looked at, because, the law itself always lags behind the developments. And you, for some countries, it's so hard to even put the law in place because they don't understand it. I think that we are seriously going to have to look at a more global IP system, so that, countries will be able to comply more easily with the system. So I think that territorial basis for IP law has to be seriously looked at, because we all will have to learn from each other in terms of how to deal with the evolving new inventions and the new knowledge. It's going to be hard to expect countries that are already way behind to be able to catch up and to put the necessary regime in place.
It's a really, really good point about global harmonization of IP laws. I think it's a really, really important point. And as the cost for IP keeps going up, I think that becomes even a bigger rallying cry too, especially for smaller countries where trying to file a patent in even just the US and Europe, can be tremendously expensive. And then the laws are so different in both countries. It makes it really, really difficult for applicants.
I'm looking at it from a small country and a small region perspective. How are we going to be able to manage?
Absolutely. So stay tuned. It's going to be fascinating to watch, that's for sure. And
yes.
Loreen, as the podcast comes to a close, I mean, you've had an amazing career with all that you've done and all you've tried to help do there in Jamaica. And I wanted to ask you a personal question. What's been the most rewarding part of your career so far? And what keeps you so very passionate about IP and innovation?
The most rewarding part is as I said before, establishing an organization that is growing, and that is providing a very vital service to the Jamaican people. And, being able to give advice, being able to share and give advice in terms of intellectual property and tech transfer. Those, I think, and the reason I say that is because I really believe that IP and tech transfer are critical areas that we in Jamaica need to master, and to and to be able to use, to help us to move forward. And so I'm really glad that I've been able to make this contribution. And I remain passionate because there is so much to be done. And, I really, would like to see us becoming more intentional and more determined to advance IP and tech transfer in Jamaica and also in the region. And as such, I'm going to be doing all that I can to realize that.
Well, thank you so much, Loreen, for your time today and sharing with us about the development of JIPO and all that you're doing to help tech transfer there in Jamaica. This has been an absolute pleasure.
Thanks very much, Lisa.
This brings us to the end of this episode of Autumn on the Air. Thank you, Loreen, for sharing your insights into the development of intellectual property and technology transfer in Jamaica and the Caribbean. Thank you for tuning in to Autumn on the Air, and be sure to join us next time for more thought-provoking discussions on the forefront of technology transfer and intellectual property.
Thanks for listening to Autumn on the Air with Lisa Mueller. Get social with us and share your thoughts. You can tweet us at AUTM or visit us online at autm.net. We'll be back next week on the air. Be sure to join us.